I know I was on the hook to bring you the next episode of the NC White Gainesville, Georgia negative saga. However, last night I went down an ancestry rabbit hole that I haven't fully recovered from, hence the bags under my eyes. I was up very late last night. Any case, I don't know if you recall, but in one of the previous videos I did on the Phillipsburg negative, I mentioned that I couldn't, because the family immigrated from England, there were some documents that were that were not available to me without paying an international fee of $200, which I did not want to do. But fortunately, I had a follower reach out to me and say, hey, I can access those documents. I'm going to help you out here. So last night, she contacted me. Her name is Kirsten Dennis. And she's very interesting because her and her husband are restoring a castle in Texas. And yes, you heard me right. That's what they're doing. And I'll put a link to their Facebook page in the comments so you can go check it out. It's really very interesting. Any case, so the first two documents that she gave me more things than that, but were really significant. One was a census report in 1860 in England. And in this census report, you have listed Robert Mule, M-O-U-L-E, Locke, and his wife, Charlotte Todman Locke. Also, there are 4 children, Robert Jr., Mary, George, and Hannah. So this is the 1860 census. There's also a person listed as a visitor, and that's a little bit interesting to me. I don't know if that's considered the same as a boarder here, but in any case, a little interesting there. So that's the 1860 census. I'm going to backtrack for a second here because also I found the baptismal record for Robert Sr. In 1851, he was baptized into the Church of Latter-day Saints. I didn't know there was a presence of Mormons in England, but there were. Kirsten sent me a little document talking about how there was a significant activity of the church in Britain, and they had roughly 30,000 members. So that's kind of amazing. I didn't know that. In any case, it's going to matter later on when I talk about this a little bit more. So there you have the census, it lists the people. Great. Okay, so now the other thing that she gave me was the manifest for the ship that they came over to the U.S. on, and it was called the Amazon. They arrived in New York on the 21st of July, 1863, and I'm not sure when they left, but probably in June, maybe early June, so 2 or 3 weeks journey, and they were in steerage, so steerage is not that great. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so on the manifest list, these are the people that are listed. So you have Robert Sr., his wife Charlotte, Robert Jr., Mary, George, Hannah, which I knew about from the previous census. She's 3 years old. And there's a child that I had not heard about before by the name of Samuel, and he's under 1 year old. Okay, so there's 5 children and 2 adults. They take that journey to New York, and it had to be absolutely miserable. It had to be absolutely miserable. So they get here, and they then go to Nebraska. And why did they go to Nebraska? Because their ultimate destination was Utah. And this trip was facilitated by the Mormon Church, and the company that took them to the final destination of Utah was a Daniel D. MacArthur company. And there were a lot of families that took the same trip. It's August. It's hot. So they leave August 6th, and on the 15th, Hannah passes away. She's 3 years old. Okay, she's 3 years old. And there's a little bit of a write-up about the circumstances. And, it was just, I just cannot even fathom how miserable that must have been. Disease, dehydration, all those things, the weather. It just had to be absolutely horrifying trip. And so on the 25th of August, little baby Samuel passes away. Mind you, they haven't even left Nebraska yet. They're still in Nebraska. So you're 19 days into this trip, and you lose 2 of your children. It's a hard trip. It took them almost 2 months to get to Utah, which the remaining family did. So the ones that got there, of course, Robert Sr., Charlotte, the wife, Robert Jr., Mary, and George Locke, our person of interest. So they get to Ogden, and in the 1870 census, Robert Sr. is listed as a watchmaker, and the people on the census are Robert Sr., Charlotte, Robert Jr., Mary, George, and a little girl by the name of Ellen, who is 5 years old. There we are, 1870 in Ogden, Utah. Shortly after that census was taken, Ellen passes away. Then, in 1876, Robert and Charlotte have a little girl by the name of Mabel. And in 1878, they have a little boy by the name of Benjamin. So this is 1878. So we're at 1878. Fast forward to 1880 census. I don't have a census on Robert Sr. and Charlotte. After the 1870 census, I don't have another census for them. I do have a census report in 1880 for Mary and her new husband, Cyprian Stephen Cobb. He went by C.S. Cobb. So in this census report, they're now in Kerwin, and also on that census report is George Locke. He is living with his sister and his brother-in-law. And this is what started the journey of George A. Locke to become a photographer, because he was living with his brother-in-law. I'm sure they all learned the trade from George, and that was the beginning of his career. They had just married the previous year, and they married in Kansas, right outside of Kansas City. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how Mary and her brothers got to Kansas, but they did, obviously. There are no 1890 census reports because they were destroyed in a fire, but in the 1900 census report, we now have Mary and her husband C.S. Cobb, they have a son by the name of George Lincoln Cobb. Also living with them at the time is Mary's older brother, Robert William Locke. And so by Mary naming her son George speaks a lot. I mean, because I mentioned in the previous video that I did about how these three were just close. Now you know why. Now you know why they were so close. These kids, first of all, if they did have a mother other than Charlotte, this woman by the name of Mary, Robert Jr. and Mary would have known their mother. George likely probably did not, because she would have died shortly after he was born. So you have that, okay? Then you take this journey to the U.S. on this boat, on this ship, in steerage, in the worst conditions. Then you get to New York. Then you travel again 10 days, 15 days to Nebraska. Then you start this next journey. You watch two of your siblings die, right? And the circumstances had to be so horrific. Then you get to Kansas, and after George's divorce, he ends up moving to Fort Morgan with his sister, brothers, and nephew, and they stayed together to the end of their lives. They all died in Fort Morgan or Wiggins, Colorado, and Robert and George are buried there. Mary did have her body was returned to Kerwin to be buried with her husband, but yeah, so they were extremely close, and I think their life journey made that the reason why they were so close, because yeah, a lot of times all they had was each other, and I think in particular Mary seemed very motherly type person. And one thing that I noted, I didn't think about previously, I could never find any information on what happened to Robert Sr. and his wife, Charlotte. You know, we know that they had, their last child was born in 1878. Okay. He was born in 1823. So, you know, they led a pretty hard life. I just don't know. But what's interesting, and you can't read too much into things. However, George and Mary there's two separate pictures. One is Mary, her new child, George Lincoln Cobb, who was born in 1883, and Mary's brother Benjamin are in the picture. And in another picture, it's George A. Locke, his nephew George Lincoln Locke, and his brother Benjamin are in this picture. So you don't want to read too much into it, but between the 1870 census, actually between 1878, when their last child was born, and 1883, that's what, 5 years, I guess? Something must have happened to the parents, because why would Benjamin be living with his sister? In any case, that's the catch-up of what's going on with the Locke family. I just think it was just Uh, so I was really sad looking at this. Like, I knew that Hannah died young, but when you kind of see the circumstance, and I'll put some information in here so you can kind of see a little bit more, some of the documentation that went with it. By the way, both of those children, both Hannah and Samuel, are memorialized on a monument in Salt Lake City, Utah, along with other children that died making this journey out to Utah. But there's a little write-up in under each one of them. This is a tragic story, but yeah, life was hard then. You know, we just don't have any understanding what these people went through. Just horrible, horrible experience. In any case, I am going to do another one. I hadn't planned on it, but I contacted a descendant of George Lincoln Cobb today, and so I'm going to do a little bit on that side of the story, that little bit of history there. So stay tuned for that.